fine details. So as opposed to getting a finished drawing with all your textures and like tints and shades, you're going to basically just get the outline. So what it translates to in French is actually outline, the word that contour. So it could be used actually as your finished art as well. So you want to take into consideration what you're going to draw. And it can be anything in your house. It can be even outdoors if you have a nice window or door wall view, or you are able to get outdoors. So I do have some examples of some things that I drew. What you do want to look for, though, primarily are some interesting lines. So I'm going to show you some things that I drew. Oh, and also, just to say, you can use any paper you have, even if it's the back of some sort of printed handout. So if you're short on paper, just get creative. You could even use a newspaper, and that could be interesting too, especially if you have a contrasted drawing tool like a bright red crayon or a marker. So I actually did some sketches in my sketchbook. I'm going to show you here. You have to get real close. These are done in pencil, just a regular pencil. You could use a drawing pencil. And they're the outlines of the shell. Now you're seeing in here what appears to be texture, but the reason you're seeing that is because that's coral and it has a whole lot of lines. So those did transfer over too. So those are 3 different shells in the contour line drawing. This is looking out my door wall, the view of my umbrella at my patio table. So you're seeing part of the chair, the table. I have a decorative ring around the pole of the umbrella that has candle holders in it. And there's the umbrella. And what's interesting about fabric is you get a lot of nice folds that can, translate with your line beautifully. If you were to take maybe a coat or a blanket, but especially a coat in particular, if it has buckles or buttons, that could be really interesting. So you can think about how you're going to lay it out too, as far as setting up a still life. It could be something that you're already looking at, or it could be something that you set up purposefully. Here, another contour line drawing. That's a chair in my kitchen. I did this with a charcoal pencil, and so that's why that translates so much darker. It's nice to have a smooth drawing tool. And when I say smooth, I mean something like an oil crayon that glides along nicely, a marker that glides along. If you're using your pencil, you might not be doing such hard pressure, but it depends on your comfort level of moving across the page. Here is one done of a tennis shoe. And shoes are really interesting because you're always getting, these separations from your stitching lines. You're getting the eyelets and the laces, and depending on how it's laid out, you can manipulate it where you pull the tongue out. We're actually going to do a shoe today. This is done in oil crayon. You're going to get a really thick lines, which can be interesting too. It depends on what you're going for. And I would suggest, as you do this practice, you may be doing along with me today, or you may just watch and then do the video and do it along, or you may do it on your own with your own subject matter. This one done in marker, just looking at some sunflowers and some foliage that were next to it. What's interesting too about a contour line drawing, this doesn't necessarily have to be finished. I could rotate the sunflowers that I did. I don't know if you're able to see them. I'll turn it over that way. They're over there by the couch. I could rotate that whole vase around and start drawing some more in this area. So I'm still referencing objects that I'm drawing, but I can create my composition differently if I so choose to. And then this is the start of one in Sharpie marker of another shoe, which is similar to what we're going to do today, the shoe. I am doing these in my sketchbook. But like I said, you could just use any kind of paper you have, even the computer printed paper. Did one earlier, and I'm going to turn my computer on. I apologize if I'm making anyone dizzy doing this. But I happen to have just this shelf here. Oh boy, I'm having a hard time if I'm seeing if it's in the view. There it is. With these objects on it. It just happens to be set up that way. I didn't set it up purposely to draw, but at one point I did draw it with a Sharpie marker. The other day, I'm going to go get that for you just a second. And again, this was just done on computer paper, and I clipped it to a folder. I had some paper underneath, of course, because the Sharpie will bleed through, and that's the contour line drawing of that. Sometimes with the contour line drawing, it's a little bit difficult to decipher what it is, and that's okay too, because you're still getting the practice of the hand and the eye coordination. So for example, with that, I'm going to set this up how I need to do it for our drawing. And being that I'm going to be drawing in marker, I'm going to put some paper in my sketchbook behind, because that's going to bleed through. And I might not want it to bleed through my other papers. I don't know if you're going to see this very well, but it's just a tray of art materials. So any kind of drawing pencil that you have, any pen. Ideally, the felt tips work better. They're a lot smoother. They go across the page a lot better. That's just a Sharpie felt tip. Any kind of marker you have will work well. Here's a gel pen. You could try that out. Crayons, these are those thicker ones, and oil crayons. But again, anything you have, try it out. And it's fun to try out different art materials. Set this up so we can see the table. And then what I have today for the subject matter, it's a boot. And you'll notice it has a lot of lines that we could be focusing on. The stitch lines, the outside lines. It has a really thick sole in this area, a very chunky heel. Has these decorative element tassels in the front. Laces are always interesting, the way they transfer over. So that is what I'm going to demo drawing. And again, like I said, you can manipulate your object. I might pull the tongue out more just for interest. If you really wanted a challenge, you could do both shoes. And you could set it up in a way that maybe one is laying down. So that's up to you when you get to your subject matter, and it could be something that, like I said, you already see in your house that looks like it would transfer interesting to a contour line drawing, or you can purposely set it up so that it's even more aesthetically pleasing. So your composition's just more, I guess, interesting to look at or look into. There's more things to look at. So for now, I'm just going to work with the one boot for our demo purposes today. I'm going to use a Sharpie marker because I do like the way it glides across the paper, and also as I pick up my paper to show you, you're going to see it a lot better than if I were to do a pencil. But don't underestimate the power of the pencil, because it does give you beautiful lines. And when we do our next Zoom, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can push these contour line drawings a little bit further, and some interesting things that we can get out of them aside from just an outline of an object we're looking at, or the lines within the objects. All right, so if you wanted to, you're welcome to draw along. However, the way that I have this set up, I might get a little bit closer. Not sure if your view, if you're going to see enough of the details in the shoe to do it, but I'm going to just kind of talk you through it so that you can then know how to do it on your own. Here I am trying to make sure that this is going to be in the view. I'm gonna kind of rotate it around. I like to be able to see these laces, so I want to make sure that it's angled in a certain way. I think it's interesting the way the tongue slapped down, so I can see this zipper here. I can see the zipper up here, but then it kind of disappears because of the fold. I can even see an inside stitch line in there where the leather is overlapped. So before you get started, you'll want to consider, you know, the height of it and the width. And you can start at any point of the shoe or object you're doing, but you want to make sure wherever you place it on the paper, you're going to have enough room for it. Now, it's happened to me before where I didn't account for that. And that could be interesting too, because the shoe, maybe if I started here, for example, if I started at this part and I ran out of room, I can then maybe, because this is so blank up here, think about, oh, well, I can get that other one back in here and that can be in the background. So just some things to think about. It's never a loss if you can't get the whole thing on the page, because that can be interesting too when we have things going off of our page. But I'm going to attempt to get the whole thing on the page. I'm going to start up at the top in the back here. And just kind of start drawing the lines that I see. Well, actually, I think I'm going to start here. Then that way I can establish if I'm putting it in my paper area, kind of in this area, I feel like I can fit the rest of it there. So it's going to be kind of set up like that. I'm starting in here, my eye is following along. Basically, that's what I drew right there. I'm going to continue down to where the zipper is. I see a little bit of a kind of a curve there. And then the zip. I am going to go to the back of the boot and come around. I see some stitching and it stops, and then I'm going to follow the stitching that I see along by the zipper and come down. Now, as far as the zipper goes, you do see lines there, and you can begin to put those in too. Or you may choose to go back and do that later.
Nina.
Yes.
Can you turn, I don't know, turn the boot a little bit, because we can't see anything behind the zipper.
I can. It's going to change the view from where I'm drawing though, but I can.
Right, I know, that's what I was thinking.
Maybe if I can come over here a bit more for you.
Perfect. Yes. Does that help everybody?
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Because I know I was thinking about it. I'm like, it's going to change it for you.
Yeah. So okay. I can change the computer a bit. There in the background, you can see that chair that I drew. Okay. So now I am bringing my view right back here, looking right here where that loop is. And so I'm going to come in and do the loop. I'm going to continue down the back of the boot. And then I see this point where the heel is coming in. I'm sure all these points of the shoe have official names. I'm not a shoemaker, so I don't know them. I'm right about there, getting my stitching transferred over. Now I'm at this very chunky heel, coming down and over and up. At this point, I feel like I want to make sure that I can get this transferred over and see where I end up. So I'm going to go back up to the top and come down a bit where I see it stops where the tongue is sticking out. So I'm going to transfer what I see here with this extra leather flap. so that I can know where the tongue comes up and around. I can draw those circles for the eyelets. Sometimes when you look at it, it just looks like an abstract work, especially when you don't have all the information in, or if you rotate it, and that can be very interesting. We can really expand upon what we can do with contour line drawings after we start to practice a few and see, you know, just kind of the interesting things that come of this. So we'll continue on with this top flap that's flipped open. Again, I see part of the zipper, so I could start to fill in those zipper lines. The zipper then is curving back down the shoe, coming right down to meet the bottom. I have a stitch line right next to that. And now I'm in this area thinking about transferring that. So just above the zipper, I have this stitch line coming over, right about there. I'm going to come up and around to the point where I can't see it anymore. I can then begin to put those eyelets in. You see another stitch line here. Getting that in there. Sometimes you can transfer these stitch lines. I have like 3 stitches actually right here, and there's only 1 there. So that can be transferred to as a thinner line, and this can be transferred as a thicker line or several lines. So here could be that 1 stitch, and this can be indicating the 3. It could be 1 thick line, or it could be several thin ones put together, then kind of looking like a thick line. All right, there's also, when you look at the fine detail, a bit of a line there, you see with the stitch line, so I might put a thin line coming up there. Now what I'm seeing here is, that could be interesting too, right, to be on top of the shoe, but for right now, we'll leave it back behind there so we can see these laces. Those are gonna come around. Those are a bit of a thicker line, so I'm using the marker so I can really transfer those over as a thicker line. I see some crossing over too. So they're going to be crossed over. And then this here, these little leather flaps are separated and coming up. I feel like I might put the toe in first though, so I know how far out those come. So I have all this drawn in, and I have the laces, this section here. I feel like I'm going to go ahead and put the toe in. So by doing that, I came around and connected it to the back here. At the bottom of the leather, there's of course the sole of the shoe. And then you have some stitching there too, which might transfer over to a thicker line. And now I'm going to begin to put these in. So there you have it. It's a very simplified drawing of a shoe because we just have all the lines that we see. We don't have necessarily shading or texture. Now that I'm looking, actually, I see a stitch line in here, so I might transfer that over too. It helps you to see more that that's the inside of the boot. But
Nina, can you hold it up, just the drawing, just again,
yeah,
so that people can kind of see?
I might just move this actually off here so I can hold the whole thing up.
Yeah, that way people can see what you've done so far.
Okay.
Oh.
So it was a very simple, quick sketch. We can really, you know, take the time to lay it out. Again, depending on what material you're using. I couldn't do any erasing with the marker, but I like that. I like to challenge myself. Oh, I'm noticing something else. I'm noticing these lines right here, the toe part of the boot. So I didn't have those transferred in yet. So I love the idea that it really has us look at what we're drawing and really focus on the lines, and there's really quite a bit of beauty in line when you start to draw in this way and really look at that. Contour line drawings, they can be used as your initial drawing, especially if you're using a pencil and drawing light, and then you can go in and add the tints and the shades. I see some light hitting here. I see some dark spots underneath here. You can start to put in texture, but just on their own, they're quite beautiful, and the exercise itself is really good for artists as far as getting that hand-eye coordination. So do we have any questions?
Yes. This is from Ryan Gray's mind, actually, because Ryan left me. It just looked a little too complicated for him.
Okay. So with that, then there are a lot of lines on this shoe. If you didn't want to go to all the stitching, you can just simply do the outside line. The other option is to find an object that doesn't have a lot of lines, a very simple object. I suggest something like a nature drawing, something that's organic, like the shell example that I showed you. I'll go back to that. Things from nature that are organic are very forgiving to draw. So if you're hard on yourself, can you see that okay? If you're hard on yourself and thinking it doesn't look anything like that, you might be more comfortable drawing something from nature or a plant. That could be like when I did the flowers. So those can be some options. The other shoe actually that I drew was not as complicated, so you might even have a shoe. This one was not as complicated. You might have a shoe that might be less detail. I picked this one on purpose because I thought, oh, this is a good challenge to really hone in and find some lines to be able to transfer onto the paper. So that's your artist's choice, what you want to draw. Does that help?
Well, I already finished mine, so.
Oh, and Shelly, is there a way that you could just pick Kenneth's view so we could just see it, so we could see it bigger?
If people have speaker view, if Kenneth starts talking, I think he'll pop up and speak.
There's his.
Wow. Well,
Good.
well, while you're showing the whole thing, I kind of like finished quite quickly, and then in that aspect, it was like I'll just follow another one, just follow the detail of the laces, but since I don't have like another sketch path thing like you have, but
Yeah.
I just decided to do one of my journals, because normally I just write my original songs in them and just like write about my feelings in them. But I was like, you know what, for this I'll just draw on this one for the day.
That's awesome. Beautiful.
Looks great.
It's a nice recording of what you've been doing. You know, it's just a different sort of recording in your sketchbook. That's great. Thank you.
Harley
Kenneth, for
found this
sharing.
boot. It looks a lot easier. We'll give it a try later.
Okay, yeah, and like I
Didn't
said,
do
you know,
anything while you were talking because she's too immersed.
Yeah, no, that's fine because this is recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again, right, Kelly?
Yes, yeah. I think the idea is that for these Zoom sessions, that we would have the instructor come in, do a demonstration, and then we could take questions about, how does it need to be altered to help each person be successful if they're going to work on it throughout the week. And then also we'll be available too, well, not me, because I don't know anything about art, but Nina, Lynn, whoever, to answer questions, if you're working on things during the week. And then I think the idea is when everybody gets back together next week, they could even talk about what they've been working on throughout the week.
Yeah, and you're welcome to share it too. If you don't want to share it, you could just share your experience. And when I say, choose something, you can start off with something, and if it's just not feeling like you're successful at it, try something else. Try a different drawing tool. So you can have many different attempts in this, and maybe you only like a few, maybe you like them all. Think about it as an exercise more than a completed fine art piece of work, right? We can get there, and like I said, we can really expand this exercise into something very beautiful. Personally, I think all contour line drawings are beautiful, but maybe not everyone agrees. So really think of it as an exercise, like you're kind of working out to work out your muscle. And the muscles you're working is your hand-eye coordination, that connection. And
Okay.
yeah, and then we'll see what we come up with. So that's
I think this will be a fun one to do, don't you?
Any other questions?
Does anybody, Lynn, do you have anything you want
Kind of give us a wave if you have a question.
Yeah, I've unmuted everybody. If anybody
Crystal's showing us something. Crystal, can you put that closer? Is it Crystal or no? Is it Crystal?
Yeah, that's Crystal.
Just say hello.
Wow. So you did mine. Or did you have one in front of you?
It's pretty good, isn't it?
Look at Abby.
Oh,
Where's Abby's?
Wow.
Oh, that's a great shoe to do. Yeah.
Abby, good job.
Those lines are beautiful, Abby.
Put it right.
Is that Aaron? Let's see, Aaron.
Aaron has something. Oh, fabulous. Scott, are you showing us something? Put it closer to the computer, Scott.
Scott, move it down a little.
Thank you for sharing. Can you put it down a little bit?
Right like that. Put it right in front of us, Scott.
Put it in front of your face. In front of your face.
You want more paper tonight?
More in front of your face.
More like a peekaboo. Put it in front of you like
Put it in front of your
peekaboo.
face so you can see it. There you go. Oh, wow. Fabulous.
They were all
Thank
working
you.
while they were watching.
That's awesome. And then, like I said, you can do it again with this video with that shoe if you have a good enough view of it. But I would suggest look around, see what's interesting. That's another part of the exercise, not only the actually doing it, but the finding something with the interesting lines. That's part of it too, is kind of really exercising, your observational skills with that.
So you're gonna start here. Go
You
down
can
the
just do as
side.
many as you want. You can do some small ones on your page. Again, like I
You
said,
don't have to do it till she's done if you want.
I could add another boot with showing the different view. You could do the same thing repeatedly. If it was an object that you were doing, if it, like, for example, the plant that I did, like I said, I need to find it. I could turn the view of the vase and focus in on a different part of it and just keep repeating. So even though maybe I only really have 2 or 3 sunflowers in that arrangement, the whole page could be filled as an overall composition, because I'm still looking at the object and transferring it onto my paper, but it's just being repeated like a pattern. So hopefully that gives you some good ideas and some things to think about, what you can set up or what you already see, and go ahead and draw it.
On my doors are just simply round. They're just circles, and they have another circle side of and another circle inside of that. So sometimes if you just start with shapes that you're familiar with, sometimes it's easier to start that way. So Ryan, if you're not on here anymore, I'll touch base with you.
Hey, Miss Lynn.
So Becky's gonna try to do my phone because there's some lines in there, but there's not tons of lines. So she's gonna try that. Of course she wants to do flowers.
Hey, Miss Lynn. I lost
Yeah.
weight. I lost